Ravenous is a horror film from 1999 starring Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle. It takes place in the 1840s during the Mexican-American War. It's smart, suspenseful, and full of colorful characters that the audience grows to love before they are brutally murdered. But more than that, Ravenous is absolutely loaded with themes and underlying messages. It is about the frailty of the American male, homosexuality, but more than anything, the film, in no uncertain terms, condemns violent expansion of government territory using the 19th century example of manifest destiny. For the uninitiated, a brief history lesson may be in order. In the United States in the 1800s, manifest destiny was the popular belief that American settlers were destined by God to expand across the continent, removing, displacing, and killing anyone who laid claim to the land far before Americans, meaning both Native American tribes and other colonial settlers from other countries. It was a kind of spiritual colonialism, or colonialism using spiritualism as an excuse for greed, greater wealth, and new territory. Although forced expansion into new land was present in North America from the onset of colonization, the term manifest destiny was used as justification for violence against Native Americans, Mexicans, and anyone else who had something they wanted. The phrase manifest destiny was coined by newspaper columnist and editor John O Sullivan in a widely read article in 1945 urging the government to annex Texas. O'Sullivan believed it was the will of God for the United States to spread their form of democracy as far as humanly possible, from coast to coast. In short, it was a belief in God-sponsored colonialism, meaning an often violent expansion of territory and exploitation of indigenous people, or anyone who is simply there first. All caught up? Good. With that out of the way, let's briefly summarize the plot of Ravenous before explaining how this film is largely about condemning manifest destiny. Major spoilers ahead. During the Mexican-American War, Lieutenant Boyd plays dead to avoid being killed. He accidentally drinks blood after being piled up under corpses. The Army sends him to Fort Spencer, out west. There, a man claiming to be a preacher appears and tells Boyd and his fellow soldiers a story about being forced to eat corpses for nourishment in a life-or-death situation. The supposed preacher actually turns out to be a colonel in the Army named Ives. He murders and eats most of the soldiers, but initially spares Boyd. In the film and in Native American legend, eating someone gives a man supernatural strength and health. More on that later. Ives sees Boyd as a potential partner to help kill and eat other people as settlers make their way out west. Boyd eventually refuses, he and Ives fight to the death, and the story ends. The belief that westward expansion was a Christian mission is played bluntly in the film, but it also carefully divides honorable Christians and those using faith as a reason to commit atrocities. Those separate ideas of men of faith are exemplified by two characters, Toffler and Colonel Ives. Toffler is introduced to us early in the film. We are told exactly one thing about him, and much like the other characters, we only need to know their defining characteristic. He is religious. He spends his days writing a hymn and generally being pleasant towards his comrades. Colonel Ives is the man who disguises his horrors with faith. He claims that he is, in his own words, a servant of God, but he later uses this false trust to kill and devour. Ives is the very spirit of manifest destiny. He is its representation in the film. If there is any doubt, the only time the phrase is uttered in Ravenous is by Ives. He mentions it only to tell Boyd that due to westward expansion, people will be moving out west, giving them more people to murder and eat. This scene is played with an American flag waving in the background, removing all ambiguity. Ives even paints a cross in blood on his forehead. No explanation is given in story as to why he does this. It's just obvious symbolism. It should be noted that the film does not blame the American soldiers for the orders of their superiors in government. Reich, who is briefly described as our soldier in the beginning of the film, is tough and battle-hardened, but he is also compassionate. He cares about Toffler, tries to rescue him on multiple occasions, and when Toffler dies by Ives' hand, Reich vows revenge. Reich is definitely one of the good guys, and since he represents all American soldiers in the film, the screenwriter is clearly not condemning the military itself, or soldiers under orders, only questionable political decisions. Although the story takes place during the Mexican-American War, a conflict which gained new land for America by force, the film also deals heavily with Manifest Destiny as it pertains to Native Americans, and not just because the movie co-opts a Native American legend to tell a story starring white people. Wendigo, the myth portrayed in the film, actually comes from Algonquin mythology. In the Native American stories, the spirit possesses people, and those who practice cannibalism were of particular risk of being possessed. In Ravenous, it is treated more as a magic disease, but the elements of cannibalism are still present. It is no coincidence that this story uses a Native American legend and features a Native American explaining the details of Wendigo. When Boyd first drinks blood, he notices the power he receives, but is repulsed by what he's becoming. In spite of the revulsion, his hunger is insatiable, but although he can still tell the difference between right and wrong, the power is too tempting, and the hunger becomes part of him. Ives feels no such hesitation. He openly mocks the idea of morality and conceals his true intentions from everyone but Boyd. Yet they both want the same thing and end up succumbing to the hunger, at various points in the story anyway, regardless of Boyd being conflicted and Ives being excited by the prospect of it. In other words, Ravenous uses cannibalism as a metaphor for displacing Native Americans, eating everything they once were, leaving nothing but bones. The film is about hunger as greed, about literal cannibalism as figurative cannibalizing of someone else's culture. We, as a people, are not completely done with this part of our humanity just because the 19th century is long gone. To illustrate this, after it seems like the murders are done at the end of the film, General Slauson accidentally eats human flesh, restarting everything in an unending cycle. History is full of uncomfortable facts about what our ancestors did, and a century from now, they will look at some of what our generation believed and did as awkward as well. Ravenous does not shy away from this. It's brutal and brutally honest. The fact that this film is a horror could not be more appropriate.